We are back, and you are not going to want to miss this one. All right, let's just dive right in. Like metabolic health. What does that even mean?
Okay. Metabolic health, it's a very wide description and covers basically every singular, event in the body. And I mentioned singular because the metabolism is an event which is a cascade of singular events happening one after another. So if you focus just on the one, you're focusing on symptomatic application, which always will have a side effects and severe repercussions. So very important thing about metabolism, I always stress, think one thing. In human metabolism, there is no singular event. That's a very crucial point to understand. Everything, it's a cascade. You have to go from the point one to point wherever the end is of that particular metabolic chain to accomplish the wellness. There is no pick and choose. You come here, you give this, or you give this, or you apply this, because it eventually is like a domino effect. It will collapse. Okay? So, just metabolic health, if I want to just focus on one thing, which I think is very crucial, one of the first side effects of iron overload or deficiency of proteins, which is culprit of just about everything, iron binding sulfur protein, okay? And we have sulfur because, again, without sulfur, there is not one singular cellular metabolic function is accomplished. It is as important as glucose, oxygen, and nitrogen. Sulfur, it's basically responsible to create proteins. Now, when the sulfur is not present, with the 708 amino acids, we start to have different conditions. Now, the very, very first condition, which is in general happen, it's inflammation of the liver and insulin resistance, with everybody is very familiar. That's the most, I think, mentioned word right now in the entire, world market. So the insulin resistance happen in conjunction with the liver getting inflamed because of liver iron overload. And when a liver iron overload happens, it happens because we accumulate too much iron and we start to develop inflammation, which start to cause us a what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver, which most of the people have it. Now, statistically, around 70-75% of fatty liver is non-alcoholic fatty liver. Okay, so actually it's caused by food, processed food iron fortifications, and iron overload in the liver. Then this creates problem with pancreas to produce insulin. Now, very important parts. In those sulfur-bonded amino acids are two very important amino acids, okay? The first one is cysteine, and second one is methionine. So when you get methionine and cysteine together working, they create ideal bind protein secretion to the liver to create and formulate glutathione. Glutathione is basically our super antioxidant, which is designed to be involved in repair and support immune function in the entire body. At the same time, it's important because it protects us from iron overload and any type of chemical substances, including every single heavy metal. So dysfunction of liver, because of lack of those two sulfur-bonded amino acids, it causes dysfunction in glutathione, which has become a main serious problem. The second problem from it is that because of liver inflammation, we develop condition called chronic cholestasis, which is inflammation condition, which we start to have a problem with secretion and production of the bile. Now, again, we go into sulfur-bonded amino acids. There is a 19 amino acids needed to create bile. They also in mother's milk, in those 708. So we need those amino acids to create the matrix of the bile. The very first side effect of it, inflammation, is passed to pancreas and iron overload, and lack of those amino acids create structural dysfunction of insulin. Insulin, again, is made from 51 amino acids, 21 alpha and 30 beta chain, okay? And these amino acids are bonded in various places, but cysteine sulfur bonded. Without cysteine, we cannot create insulin. And that would cause us losing the structural support of insulin production and losing potency of insulin, which will automatically cause us insulin resistance. Okay? Now going back to bile, bile when it's secreted, it's very important because bile is the main breakdown processing plant for our nutrients, fats, minerals, proteins, sugars. Bile breaks down the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, K, D, and E. It's called emulsification. If that emulsification is disrupted because the bile is not secreted properly and has no strength, the molecules of all those components are too large to be absorbed in our digestive system. When they're too large, some of them will get to the bloodstream, but they will never cross to the blood barrier to the cellular level, and that's what is called insulin resistance or diabetes. Everything gets stuck in the blood circulatory level, and our cellular level start to get sick, inflame, and decay. At the same time, bile supports a lot of function in our digestive system, and also with liver, with hepcidin hormone, it regulates with those amino acids extraction and balance of gut flora, maintenance of gut flora, and extraction of iron to the liver to be actually sent to the ferritin storage capacity and to the bone marrow to red blood formation. So this is the core of metabolism. When this start to get disrupted, it start to just basically go all around the body and start to cause all kinds of problems based on genetic predispositions, okay? Now, very important part is human genes are based on 708 amino acids. Those amino acids, in order to become translate or transcripted from the DNA to mRNA, they have to have 708 of them. Basically, picture a zipper which has little teeth, and each one of them is amino acids. And the DNA sends the message how to make mRNA. And sulfur is the key component to glue basically those amino acids to replicate every single gene and then complete sequence of every single protein. Up to today, in our body, it's known we have around 100,000 different proteins, which have to have every single day 708 amino acid without one being missing in the sulfur bonded form. Otherwise, this genetic replication is completely disrupted, and we're going to have what we call metabolic abnormalities to happen.
Something stood out to me there. Just talking about bile, obviously that goes to the gallbladder, right?
Yes, of course, yeah.
So what about people that have had their gallbladder removed?
Well, they already have a insulin resistance, and most likely diabetic. They just never been diagnosed properly.
That's what I was wondering too, like with people like that aren't that they're not seeing that in their numbers based off of the, their regular blood work. Like
Well,
why isn't that showing up? And then how can we?
actually, if you know what I'm going to tell you, actually shows. Just look in vitamin D. If you look on vitamin D, if vitamin is low, you already know you have a severe bile problem. The reason is if vitamin is low D, it means we're not absorbing it properly. And because we're not absorbing, because the bile is not breaking down emulsifying vitamin D and calcium at the same time, so we cannot absorb it. So just vitamin D is indicator that you have a problem with bile and gallbladder.
And
Just
Christa,
looking,
yep, sorry.
yep,
So I
yep.
was just going to say, even if they had their gallbladder removed, our liver still can produce the bile
Yes.
acid.
Yep.
And actually, there's a storage capacity that forms um, beneath the liver to help store some bile. So we just have to go slow as we introduce more of the fats for the A, D, E, and K absorption. But
Do
yeah,
you also do you also take like bile salts?
you
Like
Okay, well, I was just leading to it, okay?
yeah.
You don't take salt, just take a good salt. A good salt have every type of salt. There is 9 different type of salts in bile. And if you eat a good quality salt, it will have all type of salts that are needed to replicate the bile salts.
Okay. Okay. There's
yeah.
a lot, there's so much to
The
unpack.
liver still can make bile salts. The gallbladder is simply to store it. So somebody with
Sorry.
that gallbladder is okay. They'll eventually form a pouch to form it or store it. And as long as we get the liver working well by feeding it the good salts, like Peter said, then we can get things functioning normal again.
I love that's
Yes.
it's going to provide a lot of hope for people. Absolutely. Because I have people in my life that have had to endure that. And
They have to go slow as they're increasing their fats. Just
yeah,
go very, very slow. Yeah.
that's really good advice. There was something else too, like what about the heart health? Like I know that we talk about the insulin and stuff, but is there something that you want to touch on with heart health?
On what? Heart?
Yeah, the heart.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, you have to remember the first thing, heart is a muscle, okay? And muscle needs to be fed like every muscle in the body. Well, the delivery system again to the muscle, it's hemoglobin, and then the muscle actually gets myoglobin. Myoglobin is actually derivative from hemoglobin, and myoglobin comes from myoglobin, which means it's the feeding system. So if hemoglobin is disrupted, production of it, it's lack of the amino acids which are in glucoferrin, your hemoglobin is not going to provide the proper feeding amount of oxygen and glycogen, causing inflammation of the muscle. And that's what we talk about inflammation, that all the cardiovascular diseases, the main problem with the heart or cardiovascular is actually induced by inflammation. Think about myocarditis. Itis, it's inflammation. Endocarditis. You see, everything is inflammatory condition because the muscle is not fed properly, which means it's going to go on stage and get excessively inflamed, and it's going to start to cause decay, and it's going to start to get the shrinking. Now, when people have deficiency of red blood cells and deficiency of sulfur-bonded amino acids, they also immediately develop condition called sarcopenia, even if they exercise. Sarcopenia is excessive muscle loss, which is one of the main reasons actually of excessive and accelerated aging in the body. And iron overload, it will cause that because hemoglobin is not formed properly, and also iron will have a tendency to build also besides the organ and the muscle tissue, including the heart muscle.
All right. What did I tell you? Today was going to be a good, juicy one. So grateful that you're all here. And if you're listening in, you have any questions, you know how to reach us. Thanks for being here.